Ableton is the best DAW out there. Maybe. It is to me, it can be to you, and we are here today to find out why and how. Here are 10 things that you need to know about Ableton. So the session view is quite not a conventional DAW. Ableton has two windows that can contribute to your workflow. One is called the arrangement view, which is the one that you're looking at right now. And this is the session view. The session view is a combination of multiple channel strips and these things that we call clips. Here, each vertical highlighted layer that you are looking at right now is referred to as a channel strip. It's a concept that's been borrowed from an analog console. Of course, it's going to allow you to set the inputs and the outputs both from the audio and the Midi perspective. It's got sends and returns, all the conventional stuff within a console like mutes and solos and pans and volume faders and etc. Now on the top of the window, within each channel strip, you see multiple tiny boxes, like I said, that we call clips, and each of these clips can hold different musical ideas. Each clip can have its own duration, each clip can have its own time signature, can be quantized to its own musical scale, and many more things like that. When it becomes interesting is that when I select a particular channel strip and a particular clip, you see a channel strip highlighted and also a horizontal scene highlighted. Now, scene is a newer thing that we've got to find out about. On the right edge of the screen, you see a number of clips that are arranged underneath each other with their own dedicated numbers. Now, each of these clips have their own transport controls too. That's one of the major things that contribute to how and why the session view is not quite a conventional DAW, because a DAW is supposed to have one global transport, essentially play, start, stop, record, etc. But Ableton, specifically the session view, is quite different because each of these clips have their own starts, stops and records. In the session view, each clip has its own transport, like the start and the stop and the record and the overdub and so on and so forth. Now I select a particular channel strip and a particular clip, and I can choose to just play that one clip, which happens to be coming out of an instrument called the mellotron. Now to that layer, let's add another one, which happens to be the vocals. Now maybe we should bring the beat in. And the drums. But then where it becomes fun is that now I have the liberty to change the combination of clips that are playing at the same time. Like, maybe try a different vocal line. Vocals. It's not coming only, stupid. Maybe try a different drum groove. So you get the point that you have the liberty to select individual clips and make different combinations of different clips from different tracks, hence experimenting and trying to arrive at an arrangement based on what you happen to like or not. Now we have spoken about tracks or channel strips and then clips, and we have seen how we can create our own combinations. But then you also see a horizontal layer that's been highlighted when I select a particular clip within a particular channel strip, and that refers to this newer concept called the scenes. Now on the right side of the window, for this example, I'll launch the 10th scene, and like the highlighted layer shows, all of the clips as part of that scene will be activated or launched at the same time. Maybe try another scene. And of course, like you would assume, each of these clips can be moved back and forth, up and down. The only limitation being that not more than one clip within an instrument can play at the same time. So within each instrument, you have the liberty to pick one musical idea and then combine it with other musical ideas from other tracks. And this as a whole is essentially the session view. So Ableton Session View is as much of a mixer and a routing tool as a digital audio workstation. You look at it on the screen, the bottom half is entirely how a conventional mixer would be. If it is an audio track, then you would get to select from different audio inputs that relate to what kind of an audio interface is part of the setup, the audio output setting as to where the sound from this track has to go to. If it's a MIDI track, then where the MIDI signals need to come in from, on what channels, and where the audio output from that MIDI track should go, and monitoring settings where you can choose either to hear the sound that is coming onto this track or not, the sends and returns, and the volume fader, and the pan knob, and the mute, and the solo, and the record enable. All of these things, long story short, is part of what a conventional mixer would do. Even though you're not attempting to write music or compose something with Ableton, even if you wanted to run a room full of instruments in a particular way, Ableton can be used as a software to mix these signals together, do routing the way you want, and use it like a mixer. I mean, as much as it can be used as a routing tool within the studio, of course it can be brought to stage as well. Regardless of you recording stuff or not, regardless of you writing and composing stuff or not, it can still be used literally just as a mixer to route signals from one place to another and monitor things the way you want and send out cue mixes for artists on stage and all of the beautiful things that you can do with a conventional mixer. The third point is kind of a complaint for some people. To me it is not, because it's kind of told that Ableton looks kind of monochromatic and all cluttered in one place, but I happen to enjoy for what it is, because the user interface allows you to expand or collapse different parts of the window as per your workflow. Now at the bottom of the window, instead of looking at just the mixer and the 8x8 grid, we enable the device view, where we in series look at what devices, including instruments and effects, MIDI and audio effects, in the hierarchy as to what is placed after what. Instead of the device view, if I happen to select a clip, I can then look at the clip view, where it opens up the piano roll. If it's an audio track or an audio clip, then the audio editor. If it's a MIDI track and a MIDI clip, the piano roll, where you're able to look at what has been programmed as part of MIDI. So the library is an incredible place to go to, because it combines all of the resources from your computer that you can use as part of your project within Ableton. That includes sounds and instruments and effects that Ableton has included as part of the software. Includes third-party VSTs and plugins that you install from the outside. Includes all the loops and the samples and the grooves and the templates. And of course, places, which essentially is adding folders and subfolders from your Finder or the file manager to be able to access different files on your hard drive. Similarly, there is also this thing called the quick help, can be enabled at the bottom left. Can be useful for somebody who's just getting started with Ableton, where it allows you to look at a description based on what your mouse is hovering over. Now all this put together, like I said, now when we look at the screen, it's a lot of things happening at the same time. But like with a conventional mixer, the first half of the window is pretty much the repetition of a particular channel strip. So all of the controls that we're looking at are pretty similar to each other. And then the bottom half is very related to what your workflow is. So it's kind of very hard to lose track of what is happening where. To me subjectively, which is why Ableton as a software being monochromatic and all concised within one window has not been that much of a problem. I can understand why it can be a problem to some people, but again, through repetition, I think this will just become habit and it will become enjoyable. Inbuilt instruments and effects. That's a beautiful trip to go on, because Ableton comes with incredible instruments and effects. Instruments are listed within the library, so are the effects, obviously both audio effects and MIDI effects. Instruments include, of course, different kinds of samplers and an array of synthesizers, each of those responsible for different types of synthesis. Some do wavetable synthesis, some do granular synthesis, some do just straight up analog subtractive synthesis, some do good FM, and of course all of the synth modules that can cause rhythmic sounds like the kick and the snare and the hats and so on and so forth. This video does not make enough space for me to talk enough about how brilliant all these instruments and effects are, but I would recommend you go ahead and test for yourselves and see how each of these things sound. And if you need recommendations as to which one to try first, Collision and Drift are some of my favorites in terms of instruments. Redux and drum bus are some of my favorite audio effects. And MIDI, of course, arpeggiators are great, and chord generators are great, randomizers are great. Instrument racks and drum racks. This is a great concept that is limited to Ableton as well. The drum rack, like the name suggests, is a combination of multiple sample holders onto which you can insert different samples and then create a combination of sounds that then can be called as a drum kit. Can be electronic, can be acoustic, can be synthesized. But essentially, drum rack is a combination of instruments put together within the same track so that all of the sounds within the drum kit can be accessed and be programmed within the same track itself. Of course, if you need to separate them and have kick on a separate track, the snare on a separate track, you can do that. But the drum rack is also a great way to sort of route things within the same group. There's enormous amounts of flexibility within the drum rack and so within the instrument rack. So if I were to enable the inputs and the outputs, you pretty much have a more concised form of a mixer within the rack itself, where you are able to set the volumes, the pans, the mutes and the solos, launch certain things or not, change or swap the samples. And there is very little limit as to how many samples can you hold within the same drum rack. Unfortunately, this project does not happen to have an instrument rack. I'll drag and drop an instrument rack onto an empty track. Now this rack suggests, like with the drum rack, can hold multiple melodic and harmonic instruments. That way, like with the drum rack, how you would do rhythmic programming within multiple sounds within the same track, you can do the same here with melodic and harmonic instruments. Instrument racks and drum racks also allow for many other features like the macros. Macros are an incredible way to concise all the different parameters within an instrument and an effect in terms of what you might want to access very quickly as part of performance or as part of composing within the studio. All of the MIDI devices incorporate faders and knobs based on how macros can be mapped to them and then be used as a tool to write and perform as well. Warp is a lifesaver. Truly. Because pitch being related to time is a great thing, a great advantage, and also a great disadvantage many times, that when you happen to change the tempo of a particular thing, the pitch also changes. Warp takes care of that not happening, because Ableton allows for you to bring in any sample from anywhere, regardless of what tempo it was recorded in, and still change the playback speed, change the tempo while you retain the pitch. This you can imagine as to how helpful it can be, because you're free to change the tempo and experiment with it even after you've recorded. MIDI is quite straightforward to do this with, and all other softwares allow us to do it as well. Special things start happening when we talk audio and then changing the tempo of an audio track, and Warp saves our life there, because Warp allows us to change the tempo while we retain the pitch, like I said earlier. Key mapping and MIDI mapping. This is also something that is limited to Ableton only in terms of how accessible and easy to do it is. On the top right corner of the window, you see these two settings called the key and the MIDI mapping. And when I click on each of those, you see a bunch of different parameters on the window highlighted in purple and in orange based on which mode. The key mode allows you to look at anything that is highlighted in orange right now and assign it to a key or a combination of keys on your keyboard, the computer, the alphabetical keyboard. The same happens with the MIDI mapping mode with MIDI devices instead of the alphabetical keyboard. MIDI keyboards and control surfaces are very vital devices to use within the studio environment and on stage. And commonly you will see MIDI devices, control surfaces and keyboards designed in a particular way with 4 or 8 faders and knobs and buttons, and all that has to correlate with what kind of parameters are highlighted here when we go into the MIDI mapping mode. So knobs can be mapped to the knobs on the keyboard, the buttons here can be mapped to the buttons there, and the volume faders, for example, can be mapped to the faders there on the hardware keyboard as well. This ability to pick anything within the software and map it to any hardware controller within the room, and pick any parameter within the software and map it to any combination of keys on your keyboard, this contributes to the workflow more than I can explain. Input quantization is a brilliant concept, and it allows you to always be on time, like the name suggests. Here on the top left is a setting where you can change to what kind of a note value the input quantization will quantize the incoming commands to. Like the name suggests, input quantization has to do with you inputting a command like play, stop, record, pause, and these commands are only executed quantized to the grid and the tempo of the project. I need to show you what this is for you to really understand what I'm talking about, and for reference's sake, let me put the metronome on. And in relation to the metronome, I will launch certain clips, play certain clips, stop certain clips, and each time I do a certain thing like that, you will see whatever command I'm trying to input will only be executed at the end of that consecutive bar. Why the end of that consecutive bar is because the input quantization setting is set to 1 bar. Like you see here in this drop down, it can be set to many other different values. 1/32 essentially means the 32nd note, which will be immediately after you input the command. So immediately after you choose to start or stop, it will start or stop. But then when it is on a setting like 1 bar, here we start. Now I'll try and stop both the vocal tracks, but then you will see it'll only be stopped at the end of that consecutive bar. The vocals have stopped there. Let's get the drums out. That's input quantization. Max for Live is another category within the Ableton library. Max for Live is essentially an open source platform where users can use Python as a coding language to create their own instruments and effects. I think it'll be more useful for us to look at a couple of Max for Live devices that people have created. That way we can relate to how it can be useful in our own workflows. This one is an expressive step sequencer. If you've used Ableton before, you would know that a really nicely made, graphically sound, good looking step sequencer is absent within the software. Now, step sequencer can be a great tool to use as part of your musical workflow. And here is somebody executing that need. The point was that it was necessary for this person to want to use it as part of their workflow, and hence they created this device. Now it is up for us to see if it can have any place or can play any role within our workflow. Another example would be this device called the MPE Merge. MPE is Midi polyphonic expression. If you've heard about these devices like Roly and Continuum, they are essentially based on this concept of MPE. And MPE is like how with a conventional keyboard, velocity is an interesting thing and a contributing thing. Like that, with MPE devices, there are more things. Velocity is represented by how hard you hit the note. Aftertouch is another parameter which is represented by how much you dig into the note after you play. There is slide, which is you sliding your finger from top to bottom of the key. There is glide, which is you sliding your finger through multiple octaves up and down. There is release, which is the lift off, or you taking your finger off the keyboard and that having a particular effect. Now all these different parameters come together to make it one expressive keyboard that you can use as part of your setup. Now MPE Merge is an incredible tool like we see here, which allows you to individually recognize all of these different types of messages that are coming from an MPE keyboard like the Roly and merge them together to use them with other software sounds and instruments within Ableton. So we've spoken about scenes before, which will allow you to launch a combination of clips at the same time. But then moving from one scene to another so far has been a manual affair. So I launch a scene. And then I move to another scene. And another. And another. Now follow action. Wow. That's a long reverb. Fun reverb. Now follow action is a way to automate this process, where instead of me manually launching scene after another, I can set a particular duration as to when a scene has to execute and launch the next scene or the previous one, so on and so forth, hence arriving at a particular kind of an arrangement. When I click on the master track and when I am on the clip view, to the left you see the follow action window, where the follow action has been disabled right now. Clicking on it will enable it, letting you choose between several options, where next was what the default setting was, which goes to say that this scene, when launched, will launch the next scene after. But when is the last setting. Now the setting is set to 1 bar. So if I were to launch this particular scene, it'll play for a bar and then launch the next scene automatically. So let's set the duration to 8 bars and then launch the clip, which essentially means the scene that we have launched will play for 8 bars and then automatically will start playing the next scene after. I did that because there is a long reverb on the next scene and it would never stop otherwise. This is follow action. So here are 10 things that I think everybody should know about Ableton. There are many more things about this software that contributes to why it is my favorite, can be your favorite, and I hope you get to experiment by yourself as well and have fun while you do that. And if you happen to like Ableton so much that you move to Ableton, then please raise a flag and write down in the comment section as to why and what made you move to Ableton.